2016 and all of the disappointments than to have one of our old friends join us here to talk about good things in 2017. One of those good things is certainly the Maryland Terrapins on the upswing right now, perhaps in football, but certainly in basketball as the clock turns this week. Nebraska in, and then a little road trip, and then Indiana next week. We welcome the man, the myth, the legend. We don't have him on as often as we could or should. We welcome Johnny Holliday, the longtime voice of all things Turtles in College Park. Been a momentous week or two here for you, Johnny Holliday. You're airplane to airplane, and now here we go into this Big Ten thing in basketball. Looking pretty good on the court, right?
Yeah, they're looking awfully good, Nestor. First of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And the way they played against Illinois the other night was terrific. These guys put it all together, and that's probably been the big Achilles heel for this team is the quick starts against all the other non-conference guys that they beat to start off 12-1. Now they're 13-1. But to beat Illinois the way they did and to have a total team effort without those two big guys, without Checo and without DeMonte Dodd, was a tremendous tribute, I think, to the team, but also to the way that Mark Turgeon got him prepared for this game, because he was really concerned about it. He didn't know if they were going to be able to compete with that big front line that Illinois had, a couple of guys at 6'10", a guy at 6'11", but they did it. They're now 13-1. That's the biggest conference opening victory they've had since way back in, I think, 74, when they beat Clemson by 29 points in the ACC opener that season, and they win by 25 here, and good things are still to come, I think, for this team.
Well, I think the jury's out on how good Illinois is going to be, but certainly for Maryland. I go back to that Ohio State game last year where they just kicked the snot out of Ohio State kind of early in the year. And, that's a good feeling to get the conference off. But more than that, to be 13-1, to not be ranked at this point, I'm sure there's a carrot there. And with the big guys out on Tuesday night, and Dodd and Tchaikovsky, it certainly created a different kind of lineup and maybe some versatility that Turgeon's now found, that they can do this with guard play because they have really, really good guards this year.
Well, a couple of times on Tuesday night against Illinois, they actually had three guards playing at one time. You got Cowan out there, you had Brantley off the bench, and you had Melo Trimble. And you talk about the guards and you talk about the young guys they have with this team with Herter and Jackson and Cowan, all three freshmen. I don't think they have any idea as to how good they can be as the season rolls on. They even though they're freshmen by name, they just play way above their years because they've all had AAU experience. They've all been, like in Jackson's case, the under 18, under 19 team in Canada that went to the World Championships, and Herter, the under 18 team for the United States with the Mark Turgeon as an assistant coach over the summer. So they've got more experience than most young freshmen have coming in. But they are terrific, and the way that Mark Turgeon runs this basketball program, I mean, he looks at a matchup, and you're going to be without Dodd, you're going to be without Tchaikovsky, and the message against Illinois was you got to pound the ball, you got to have the guards take the ball to the hole, you got to have the guards get some rebounds, and if you look at the rebounds, I think it was Brantley had 5 rebounds, the smallest guy on the floor. Anthony Cowan had 3 boards as well, and of course Melo can do everything. He can distribute, he can score, he can rebound, he can run the floor. So it was really kind of like a total team effort. And you talked about rankings. I don't think Turgeon even cares about that, but the media certainly does, and the fans certainly do. And if that doesn't get him in the top 25 this week, I don't know what will. But if you beat, for example, they should beat Nebraska on New Year's Day. That team is 6-6, and they have been struggling up sometimes, down most of the other time. Then it really gets interesting because then you got to go to Michigan, and it's always tough to win there. Then you got Indiana coming to College Park on the 10th of January, a 9 o'clock game, and of course that is the team that I think you got to beat in the Big Ten, Indiana.
Well,
but still, Illinois had come in with a 6-game winning streak, and they were averaging 79 points a game in that 6-game winning streak, and they scored 20 points less against Maryland.
Johnny, we sit here and talk about these players, and when I saw him dribbling against Georgetown 6 weeks ago, I'm just trying to figure out who the redheaded kid is and who the Canadian kid is and who's going to play where, and I guess Turgeon's kind of figuring that out too. I mean, last year was so exciting with these players that we'd already seen at Georgia Tech, we'd already seen Suleiman at Duke, we knew a little bit about them. It almost felt NBA-ish in sort of a scouting way. Now when you bring in the Cowan and these young players, you're trying to figure out who they are, what their tendencies are, what number they're wearing. I know you're calling the games, you got all that. I've gotten a little more comfortable with this thing heading into the Big Ten, having watched them play and scuffle at various points and, wind up having to rally in the second half against teams that they had no business, struggling with. But I think it's kind of all worked out well now. I think Turgeon knows a lot more about this team. And I think from a fan's perspective, going down to College Park to see them play on Sunday, let's say, against Nebraska, we're all familiar with these guys. It just took a little while, right?
It does take a little while, and I think he knows the right buttons to push. And a perfect example, I think, Nestor, going back to the game against Illinois, L.G. Gill got a lot of minutes in that game, and he came in, he started the first couple of games, transferred in from Duquesne, where he was their leading scorer, their leading rebounder, had 3 double-doubles last year, been in double figures like 15 or 16 times with Duquesne last year, and he really hasn't played that well at all here at Maryland. He's been a guy that's missed a lot of easy shots, and we had him on our pregame show. I did a little piece with him, and I said, this is really your chance to shine, because you're going to get some valuable minutes. All he does is go out there and play 23 minutes, led the team in rebounding with 7. He had 6 points. He only took 4 shots, but he hit 3 of those, and he came through exactly the way that Mark Turgeon had envisioned him doing. He said, I got to get a good game out of Gill, and I mentioned to him, it only takes one game to break out of things. And as struggling as he's been struggling all season long, this may be the game that gets him over the top and gets him right back in sync where he should be. And a kid like Jalen Brantley that I really like a lot, I mean, the kid is quick, the kid is hard-nosed, the kid is not afraid to drive in there in traffic. He's only maybe 5'11". If he's 6 feet, that's stretching things. He gives them 20 minutes. Everybody who scored against Illinois knew what they had. Everybody knew what they had to do, and everybody scored. And a lot of guys, in fact, only 4 guys played more than 25 minutes. Everybody else, the distribution of minutes was incredible. The fewest amount, Wiley had 14. The most minutes went to Anthony Cowan with 34, and there's a freshman and there's a sophomore. So I think with any Maryland fan that follows this team, it's a young team with only DeMonte Dodd being one of the seniors and Gill being the other senior. That's it. Everybody else is underclassmen. So when you talk about a bright future, my goodness, and you wonder how good this team will be when it gets to be tournament time.
Well, Johnny, I was disappointed last year. I mean, I had the visions of national championship or that kind of run, and it became pretty apparent in February with Trimble's injury, as well as just a floor full of guys that looked like they couldn't wait for the NBA draft. Yeah. This is a different group here, and I think Trimble coming back, what a great decision by him, and I hope it works out and he makes $1 billion in the future and all that, but really a good decision for him to come back here and work on his game, because he's putting himself into that sort of lottery category now, and I think people are talking about him, and if there's any kind of run at all that goes beyond, let's say, the 16 this year, he will be the straw that stirs the drink, and it's so obvious what he's going to be the best player in the Big Ten this year.
Well, he certainly has a shot at being the conference player of the year, and I think that's one of the selling points that Coach Turgeon had with him when he was thinking about going to the NBA. And all these people have his ears telling him how good he is. You can make a lot of money. Look what happened to Diamond Stone. He went, and he should have stayed, and he's not getting a lot of minutes. But look what happened to Jake Layman. Jake Layman was a guy that didn't get a lot of the headlines last year, and he's still in the NBA with the Portland Trail Blazers. He told Melo, go to these camps. Go and try out. Don't sign with an agent, because if you do, you're toast at that point. Go to the camps. You will find out yourself how good you are against some of these other guards. And there was a lot of good guards that came out this past year. So if you think you're good enough to compete with these guys and play with these guys right now, then you go ahead. Well, he comes back and he said, I think one more year might help me. Well, you find out quickly how good you are. If you think you can stop Russell Westbrook, you let me know, okay? So one more year certainly is going to help him, and hopefully it'll be another year after this for his senior year. But he's done everything. He's taken the leadership role, and there's not a lot of vocal guys on this team, Nestor. All these guys are pretty low key. But I think of all the guys who stepped it up leadership-wise, it has to be Melo. He knows where everybody should be. He's still got that infectious smile in his face all the time. He absolutely loves the game of basketball. And I think the guys feed off of him. A kid like Cowan can learn so much. A kid like Brantley can learn so much from Melo because he does everything so well. And when you talk about a guy that everybody's focusing on, which they did against Illinois, if you shut down Melo, you beat Maryland. Yeah. Eight times now he's at 20 points or more. There's no way you can stop the guy. And he's been single-handedly has won some games for the Terps this year when they were in trouble, and he came through at the last minute with a last-second shot or a last-minute assist to get those wins. So he knows what it takes to win, and you just love the kid. And you hope that whatever his future holds for him, no matter what it is, if it's the NBA or overseas or wherever, or if he hopes to come back to Maryland for another year, he's going to be successful no matter what he does. But he's a great kid.
He is Johnny Holiday. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at HolidayKid, as well as at jholiday.com. Always doing good stuff. And, of course, the longtime voice of the Maryland Terrapins, both football and basketball. I'll get back to basketball in a minute. Johnny, Detroit and the football program began the week. And, I saw the crowd, and we had to know that was the way it was going to be. And I would prefer that all these bowl games be held in some sort of rotation of Tampa and Miami and Orlando and Arizona and whatnot. But, all things considered for the Maryland year, I think certainly an uptick, and all the word on recruiting an uptick. And, and seeing Perry Hills out there run around on Monday, it really does give you pause to say they might have won another game or two had bad things not happened to him, and likely. And it wasn't a year of good fortune, but in the end, I like the way they competed on Monday in a bowl game. I did.
Well, when you look and see what Durkin did with mirrors, smoke and mirrors sometime, and you mentioned Hills, very few games he started and finished the game. He had to come out of the game at Penn State. He got knocked out of that one. He missed the Nebraska game. And you're exactly right. Had he been healthy, I'm thinking at least 2 more wins in the books, and you're not playing in Detroit. You're playing in a much more high-profile bowl. But to be able to get 6 wins with this team, with what he went through, with Hills going down, then the suspension for Harrison, his number 1 running back, late in the year, the fact that Shane Cockrell doesn't play in that bowl game, academically ineligible at the last minute, and he didn't play. You lose your starting left tackle in Michael Dunn. His final game is a Terrapin, and he's got a bad foot injury, and he can't even suit up for the game. You lose Will Likely. I mean, you lose this guy and that guy, and still they get 6 wins is incredible. But like Coach says, injuries all part of the game. You got to play with who you got to play with, and I think the biggest thing they're going to have to do next year is get some guys that can really hang in there, and defensively especially, and be able to stop the run. Because the Big Ten is a much more different animal than the ACC was, football-wise and basketball-wise. And you got to have some big, tough, strong guys to compete with the big boys. And next year's schedule is a murderous schedule, opening up at Texas. But he's building on things. And, people talked about, well, this bowl doesn't mean anything. It means something to the coaches. It means something certainly to the players. And even more so to the seniors, gives them one more last chance to play, and a game that's going to be on television. Not a lot of people were there in person, but everybody knew that going into Detroit. It's a tough time the day after Christmas, and 2 teams trying to establish themselves with winning seasons.
Do you ever figure out why they do a bowl game in Detroit like that?
I don't know. A couple of years ago, they had 40-some-odd thousand people for the bowl game, and it was like Western Michigan against, I don't know, somebody.
Somebody that could drive there, right? Literally.
See, Boston doesn't travel well, and had this game been in New York, I think we'd have had a lot of fans up. You take the train up. You make a weekend of it. But to get to Detroit, it was pretty tough. And, my hats are off to all the guys. They hung in there. They did the best they could. And I think it's only blue skies and bright lights ahead for the football program.
A little weird to see the top off of the Cole Fieldhouse after all these years, right?
Oh, my gosh.
I see those pictures. I don't know if it's something I want to look at until it's done, right?
I know, but you know something? When you envision what's going to be inside that facility, this will be the nicest state-of-the-art medical facility and all-purpose facility, I think, of any college team in the country. So that's a major recruiting tool they got, too, when this thing finally gets, up and rolling in a couple of years, maybe a year or so, I don't know. But they're coming along pretty good, but it does look strange. And you don't really realize how big Cole Fieldhouse was until you look at it. It's gigantic.
Well, against the horizon of the sky down there next to Bird Stadium.
Yeah.
Now, Bird Stadium starts to build up a little bit with that extra deck there over the last 10, 15 years. It's going to be fun, I'll tell you that. And I certainly feel like this Maryland thing, going back to them being mired in debt in the ACC, not really being able to get out of their way in football, having that transition period at the end of Gary. I like the Big Ten. I do. I don't want to say I don't miss the ACC at all. But I don't really feel like I missed the ACC. I'm happy having Indiana come in, and I'm not the bleeding heart Maryland guy, as you know, Johnny. I didn't go there. I've been supportive. It's been a little bit of Baltimore versus Washington through the years and all that. I've always been a Terp supporter. I was not one of those guys, crying and pining away for days in Clemson and in Florida State and in Winston-Salem, quite frankly.
Well, I think to move forward and to continue to keep up with the Joneses in athletics, you've got to improve things. They improve the facilities. If you go through Gossett Team House, it's absolutely incredible. A recruit can come in that Gossett Team House and say, wow, look at this stuff. Look at these guys who've gone on to prominence in the NFL. Look at these guys that have won all these awards, and they played here at the University of Maryland. When you walk in that Maryland basketball complex, and the same is true for lacrosse and field hockey and women's basketball and all the different sports that they have, they are competing with these other teams in the Big Ten. And there was a lot of speculation going in, well, can Maryland compete? Yeah, they can compete very well. And had it only been for a loss here or a loss there, they would have won the Big Ten regular championship a couple of years ago when they got beat by Wisconsin to knock them, out of the chance to win the conference. But they're holding their own, and I think they're only going to get better. The exposure is incredible because you've got the Big Ten network. So no matter where you go around the country, you can watch a Maryland game wherever you are. That's something you didn't have in the ACC. And they talk about the Big Ten being the best conference in the nation. There's no question it is. Certainly in football, and I think in basketball as well. You got Duke, you got North Carolina in basketball in the ACC, and that's about it. But, boy, when you look in the Big Ten, you got Indiana, and you got Michigan State, and you got Illinois, and Maryland. I mean, you got a lot of real tough teams. And night in, night out, once you get rid of the non-conference schedule, there's no patsies. There's no gimmies in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no more Jacksonville State and St. Peter's. We're done with that for a while,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. But I think it's been a good move. There was a lot of people skeptical at the beginning about it, but I think most people now have bought in, as I have. But the thing I missed the most was the convenience of the travel when you're going to Chapel Hill and the NC State and Wake Forest and Duke around that area. You can see 4 teams. I mean, people can drive down there. Now, it's a little bit tougher to get to Ohio State if you're going to drive. You can drive to Penn State. You can drive to Rutgers. But it's interesting that there was more Maryland fans at that bowl game in Detroit than there was Boston College fans. I mean, they'll get there. If there's a way to get there, Maryland supporters will do that.
I almost got to Nebraska a couple weeks ago for the football game, and it's really funny you would say, because we played in Dallas the next day. The Ravens had the Cowboys, and I had a flight out. My wife wasn't feeling it, and it was a week before Thanksgiving and whatnot, so I didn't make it to Lincoln. I've always wanted to go see a football game there, and I had everything done. I landed in Dallas, and we got our butts kicked that day. I got into my hotel in Dallas, and the game was on television, 21-0. If they're playing Wake Forest, that's just not on television,
No,
and I'm having to scramble on my computer.
You got a regional network for the ACC. Now it's expanding a little bit, but the ACC is not like it used to be either. I mean, there's no way Syracuse should be in the ACC. No way Pittsburgh should be in the ACC. No way Louisville should be in the ACC. Come on. It makes about as much sense as West Virginia in the Big 12.
Well, we're trying to do the math on all of that. The math says Nebraska on New Year's Day and 13-1. Johnny, it's always great to visit with you. I know you got baseball on the brain here and spring training around the corner with the Nats and all that good stuff. It's always great to check in with you and visit with you. And onward and upward to a prosperous 17 for all of us, Johnny.
Thank you very much, Nestor. All the best to your wife as well. We're thinking about her.
Appreciate you. Johnny Holiday, one of my favorite dudes. You can follow his journey at Holiday Kid out on Twitter. He's still a kid at heart. At a I still card him. He's 79, but he's still got to show ID to get in my bar. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you are. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook and our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.